All right. So the difference between I want everybody to understand that there's a difference between narcissistic behavior and an actual narcissistic disorder. Um, how do we distinguish the difference between the two?
Well, from my understanding of years of studying this for about 6 years now, the difference is we all have an ego. We all can display to greater or lesser degrees narcissistic traits that basically can boil down to some form of selfishness or self-interest in one way or another, or flaunting or whatever the case may be. But there's what's called healthy narcissism, where it's, for lack of a better term, I guess that's the term they use, healthy narcissism, where you have enough of a sense of self and self-preservation, where if you need to step up to the plate to defend yourself or stand up for yourself or accomplish certain things in life, you might display certain what are considered narcissistic traits. But like you say, Red, that's not the same as narcissistic personality disorder. And that's a malignant condition. Like,
Hmm.
that's not just behaviors for survival or betterment. When it spills into the realm of NPD, it's the telltale sign is there abuse involved, whether it's verbal abuse, psychological abuse, physical
Right.
abuse.
Understanding how that person adopted that type of behavior.
Hmm.
Right. And one thing that's really important to be aware of, and that is that, the studies show that people that are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, which means they're on the borderline of psychopathy, because these disorders run on a spectrum, and
Hmm.
starting with narcissism onto borderline personality disorder to antisocial, what's been relabeled now as antisocial personality disorder, which is really formerly known as sociopathy and psychopathy. So it's like a sliding scale and degrees of narcissism.
Hmm.
Um, but the only way to really know if somebody's NPD or BPD is to have a psychological or psychiatric evaluation. So none of us are really qualified to make that determination. However, um, by learning about what the red flags are, what those behaviors are, you we can start getting a pretty clear idea of the toxicity um, when it's present in a person. So really, the label itself isn't as important as what one is experiencing and viewing on the level of toxicity from the person. In other words, is there abuse involved? So that is enough to, um, what's the word I'm looking for? To prompt one to, well, first, it's really important to understand how these people, not only how they function, how their mind works, but have a clear understanding of the behavior. And more importantly, to realize that, as I was saying before, only 2% of people with NPD are ever, and I say this in quotes, cured, because they're really not cured. The best that's been accomplished is helping them understand how to modify their behaviors. But the condition itself never goes away. So this isn't coming from me. This is coming from, the experts, from psychologists and psychiatrists that specialize
Right.
um
All the
with them.
research and
Yes.
And the reason for that is because why it's such a small percentage that they actually can heal to some extent or change their behaviors is because of the number one factor, that these people do not take accountability or self-responsibility for anything. Not their actions, not the way they treat other people, none of it. it's always somebody else's fault. So when you can't take accountability for your own behavior, your own actions, there's nothing to work with. There's nothing to work with there.
Yeah, in your
And
mind, you're already in that reality that there's nothing wrong with you and there's no improvements to be made.
Mm-hmm.
right, it's
It,
complete denial. So, you know,
yep. There
they
there
say
ends.
God helps those who helps themselves, and if they're in complete denial of something, it's impossible to penetrate that and actually make any headway with any of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much a given that, when one deals or is involved with a narcissist, whether it's a family member, friends at work, or the worst, obviously, is an intimate relationship with a partner,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that needs to be understood is that that person will not change ever. And it's a hard pill to swallow at first because, when you're involved, and especially people with kids, you want that person to change. You want things to be better. You want that person to treat you better,
To be balanced, yeah.
to be
The,
balanced.
the yeah.
And it's just, it's a pipe dream. Like it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's one that really needs to be uh understood, and that's the impossibility of that person changing.
Right.
Yeah. And to extrapolate further than what you said, Ani, and we got to Redbeard, that their ends justify the means. So in their time, in their space, their reality, in this dome of solipsism, you don't want to deal with that at all. There's no accountability is fueled by that. Their ends justify the means. So everything they do, even if it's like about, throwing you under the bus, doesn't matter how many people, what they did or whatnot, the logic behind it is for them is that the ends justify the means.
Yeah,
And
they're
also, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna yeah, agree with you. They're completely Machiavellian.
Hmm. Exactly. And it's very crucial that, for us to educate ourselves, it's not to go diagnose ourselves medically then and there, because ultimately each and every one of us is not a total expert into this. And it's almost like in the way that this wound is mental. So the only way to compare this as much as you can, because like, the behavior and disorder, was there injury involved? It's very difficult because it's an injury of the mind and it's mental. So when people hear a scratch, it's like, okay, you know, roll it off. And if it's a cut, people looking at it and see how deep it is and how you treat it. And obviously, if it's someone that, has got their, you know, severed or an amputation, that's where things are severe. You have to
And it's
gauge, yeah, and you have to sort of educate yourself the those three things so that you could respond and actually seek out help to uh to treat the injuries.
Right.
And
well,
the ultimate, go ahead.
there there's no doubt that with narcissists, the injuries are deep,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really when the split happened. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we've all endured, trauma to some extent or another. It's few and far between, if any, families, don't have any dysfunction. That's just kind of the way things are set up, and our experience at this point in time and through history.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how, ultimately it's how we perceive it and how we react to that trauma. And with narcissists, what happens is usually, well, it's a lot to unpack, but let's
Well,
try to keep.
they're very, for in my experience, what I've tend to find is that they're all very charismatic people up front. They pull you in very easily. They're people that are very fun to be around at times,
Mm-hmm.
but once you start having a consistent involvement in their life, that's when you start to see that the charismatic approach that they have towards everyone around them is it's very conceited, and it's very selfish, and it's very uh, full of what you think is kind and nice, but it's all just a front or a lie.
Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
they develop a false persona, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what they present initially, but it's like a mask. And they also, one thing narcissists do and are known to do as they grow and become narcissists, they take on character traits from other people. So they're kind of like, you can kind of see their psyche almost like a shattered mirror with different shards.
Yeah, you can
And
see different personalities of
yeah,
people that they are influenced within them.
exactly. They take on other people's character traits, other people's, even in love relationships, they really don't feel love like non-narcissists do. What they do is they simulate love that they've learned how to express in a certain way through movies, through culture, through television and observing other people. They don't really have that capacity to love
Mm-hmm.
as, I don't want to say normal because what's normal, right? But as non toxic people do,
Yep.
So
you know.
so culturally and in society, it's just kind of instilled in people to not handle criticism very well and become susceptible and react to criticism with vicious, malicious, and humiliation, because they can't connect their actions with their consequences.
Yes. A normal, a functioning human being that growths corrects themselves. So an interaction with, let's say, washing the dishes, right? Um, a narcissist will never really teach you anything and never gets the job done. So the person who's in the receiving end from then will have to do all the work and then take on the burden of washing the dishes and actually feel accomplished that that is okay. The dishes actually been done, you know. But the narcissist doesn't really care if you did the dishes or not, you know. It's always going to come in and it's always going to be something, you know.
Well, with
To yeah.
with narcissists, it's all about control.
Mhm.
They feel like inside they carry such an enormous amount of shame because again, whatever trauma they endured, usually during early childhood, before the age of 8. Not to say we can't endure trauma after that, but the big break in their psyche and their state of mind usually happens through big traumas early on in life. And
Right.
what
Mhm.
they do is vow to themselves that this will never happen to them again. So they develop this false persona as they get older. And, again, the lack of accountability, there's a lot of projecting that goes on with them because
Mhm.
they can't really look at themselves because of the shame that they carry. It's oppressive and it's like crushing.
Mhm.
But
Right.
since
It's
they're,
it's so shameful that they turn themselves into the victim,
yes,
and completely ignore the fact that they have been the one that's been victimizing you.
and then instead what they do is they turn around and start victimizing others
Mhm.
for the rest of their lives. You know, um,
Mhm.
really, to touch back on the whole labeling of narcissism and whether someone's a narcissist or a borderline or a social or psychopath, we can't really trip where we shouldn't really trip up on the labels. The ultimate question one needs to ask oneself is this person toxic? Does this person contribute, equally, say in relationship? Is there a give and take, or is this a one-sided situation where I'm always on the losing end?
Mhm.
Yeah. And again, their lack of accountability, they don't take responsibility for anything, so it's always somebody else's fault, and there really is no winning with them. You can never do anything right. If you do
Yeah.
something right, it might outshine them, and then that's a problem too.
Yeah.
There-
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
no way around it. The only way around it is to get out of it.
Mhm.
But of course, not everybody's in the position, especially with kids. There's so many
Yeah.
variables.
Yeah.
Well,
There,
I did it with my family at the age of 17.
Hmm.
I knew I had to get out, and I did it on Christmas Day, and I got out, and I never turned around, and I never went back. Um, and it's been that way. It's and it was one of the best decisions I could ever do for myself because psychologically, I'm in a way better place now than I was when I was at home.
Hmm.
And so my biggest thing is probably how you should react to those types of behaviors,
that's key.
because sometimes you can be in a position where doing nothing is inflicting more damage on yourself than doing something, like getting up and walking out and saying enough is enough and just cutting it out of your life.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's particularly difficult to do. I can totally relate, and I commend you for having the courage to do that at the age of 17, because as you know, I my mother's a narcissist, and I always knew there was something wrong with her, and I would try to use, reason and logic and trying to make things better and communicate, and none of those things work, you know.
Hmm.
They definitely get worse the older they get. And had I known then what I knew now, I would have walked away years ago, but it is what it is, right? We can't really live in regret. So
Hmm.
great that you actually had the wherewithal and the clarity to be able to step away from a toxic situation, even with family, because it's very tough with family because we're raised, most of us are raised, even if you're in a super toxic environment with family is everything, respect your parents. There's a lot of programming that goes in, which is all wonderful if you're not in a toxic, if your parents aren't cruel or aren't abusive, that makes sense. But when you are subjected to this person's rage or misery and it's constantly dumped on you, there's really no obligation there, because at that point it's a matter of self-preservation.
Yep.
Right.
So
Yeah.
narcissists infamous for entangling our minds up, and one of the things is guilt, guilt and false hope.
Hmm.
So it's a very wide topic, and one that there's so much to unpack that undoubtedly, it'll take more than one podcast to cover, a good portion of it. But it's great that you're doing this to kind of shine light on the problem, which is really growing exponentially.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why I want to do this with you guys, is because it's a big impact on my life, and just people that I've interacted with recently are dealing with the same issues, and it's not just a thing that's going on in my life and the people's around me lives, but it's the entire world. The entire world is in a state of chaos, and we have to learn how to react to certain things in a proper way, because there are some narcissistic people that you just can't avoid, whether it be your boss at work,
mhm,
or it be a co-parent, or a family member, or it could be anything. It could be a judge, it could be a doctor, it could be just anybody that you can't just you're just, it's unavoidable. It could be the guy at the corner market station that you're buying gas from. And so reacting, the way we react is paramount, and I think is just is what sets off the difference between, or I want to say it's like the law of attraction, but that's not what I'm trying to go with this. What I'm trying to say is action and reaction. The way you react to a narcissist is I think the biggest impact on reality than the impact that the narcissist is making by doing what they do and saying the things that they say.
absolutely, because they feed off of our reactions. They
Yes.
can't process their own emotions, so they almost experience things vicariously, if that's even the right way to put it, through somebody else, in the sense of expressing emotion, right? So they basically project and put you in a state where you're as miserable as they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's just constant projection. So they live for that reaction of sadness. If they can make you cry or angry or confused or just completely gaslit, that's what fuels them. That's what feeds them
Mm-hmm.
energy. So what, to your point, Red, yeah, our reactions are key.
Yeah,
And
they feed off the chaos around them. If they don't have chaos around them, they they find it. They find a way to reach out and create chaos.
exactly.
So they so they readapt, strategize, change slightly of the pattern. This is the reason it's all the ends make game to, you know, to hook you in, reestablish the supply, and keep feeding off because ultimately they are, by the way I see it is it's very parasitic, and the only you can't control that. Really in all matter of things that each every one of us is responsible for our own selves at the end of the day. But they won't realize that it's never about that. They don't really care, and so your reactions are very important. Your input is very important. The, the more you control yourself and work on yourself in that way, that sounds really selfish and ironic. We talked about this or worry, but it's about bettering your situation and stop repeating this cycle, this pattern, and you can actually move forward. Because honestly, when you get things done, like you feel accomplished that you've done the dishes, you've done housework work, you have accomplished everything you did today, then you're actually going to move on to the next thing. With the
So it's
narcissist.
also a self-esteem issue with these people. They have a lack of self-esteem. They're just
Mhm.
I want everybody to do what I want them to do, and if they're not doing what I tell them to do, then I'm out of here.
Yeah, and it's never about resolving the problem itself. Remember, the problem is what creates the chaos. So they need that. So if we're creating more problems, they create more chaos, they create more reactions, and that link with people to supply them with what
And
they
that's how they
need.
function. That's how they function, right? It's a genetic thing also. They
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
they feed off that. They feed off the chaos. That's how they function, is off the chaos. So whether they know they're doing it or they don't know they're doing it, and they don't. I mean, obviously they don't care because they don't have any empathy or sympathy for the consequences of their actions. And when they don't realize it, and they don't care, it's almost it's so psychological and deep in the mind, isn't it like a EC, weren't you explaining something in the brain, the lack of the stimulation in a section of the brain?
Yes, there are sections in the brain physiologically, and it all pertains to biologically as well. So what we have a part of our component ourselves is called the pineal gland. It's not widely spoken, but you just type it in and you can find it. It's like there's a gland right here. And on our bodies we have chemicals, and these chemicals are responsible to create a balance within ourselves because it's what we have inside. It's supplemented, which is ironically that why medicines and pharmacological treatments are trying to stimulate and actually try to replace what already exists. There's dopamine, and the one particular that pertains to the pineal gland is serotonin. And the serotonin is like the success, the feeling success of an enlightenment. So when let's say you go out and go for a jog, and you set a goal to say that I'm going to jog an extra mile, even though it's going to be difficult, then I'm going to do it. And you achieve the extra mile. There's a feeling of accomplishment, and through that process, what you learn how to do that extra mile, that's where serotonin kicks in. You actually
So when
feel,
you start realizing that 110, that extra 10% that you put in above the 100% that you put in is worth more than the
Yeah.
100% you put in all day.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like, that whatever norms you do, okay, it's fine. But then there's the kick and urge to like say, oh, let me do a little bit more, okay? And there is success behind that, then there's a sense of enlightenment behind it because people have epiphanies, people have, break records and all these sort of things, and to make these discoveries, they all allude to people that have secreting serotonin and activating their pineal glands.
So is that the tick? Is that would possibly be the tick of a narcissist? Is somebody that feeds off gaining success off the backs of others?
Then
Oh,
that's where I elaborate with dopamine. Dopamine overlaps with serotonin, but dopamine does not reach to the pineal gland. And dopamine is the pleasure chemical. And that's what people are hit mostly when they hit, like, say, okay, I got up, had my cup of coffee, and that's it. That's a small base thing. There's nothing really successful on it because you already do that on a consistent basis. But what narcissists do is that they are burning the receptors and try to secrete more dopamine, but it's not coming out. So they have to double down on certain measures. So for a normal person, it's like, the caffeine hit, it's not hitting. So you start, changing things, less cream, or you put more sugar, or whatever you're doing, you're trying to double down, and it starts to become feeling very numb and not stimulating.
Emotionless.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why
Exactly.
they lack so much empathy. And so really it has to do with brain chemistry, and I would assume that genders would play a role in that factor too, because the brains are just made up so differently. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that's a common denominator between these people, and to your point, Ed, about what you were saying about the dopamine and
Serotonin.
serotonin. And one step further, which is another thing that's super important to understand, when what I was talking about before, whenever the trauma happened for these individuals, they got stuck at that age. Once that psyche, it's almost like a crack in the psyche happened,
Mm-hmm.
stunted. So the frontal lobe, which is in the brain, which is what processes emotion, and that doesn't develop until we get older. So they never develop the frontal lobe, which is why they have no emotional empathy. So what you're dealing with is a toddler, and emotionally a toddler, psychologically a toddler, or a small child in an adult body, which is
Mm-hmm.
not man or sustainable. And another thing, since they can't self-soothe,
so
they
the
can't.
the timing of the trauma. So at the age of the trauma that they experienced
That's
is
the
emotionally the state that they stay
yeah.
in.
That's the level of their emotional and psychological
So
maturity.
if you had something some sort of trauma happen to you at 4 years old,
Hmm.
emotionally, if that trauma isn't dealt with and balanced out, that turns into um, narcissistic behavior.
Correct. Or it
Mm-hmm.
could be a 50-50, right? Because we
If
all
it's
Mm-hmm.
endure
not,
trauma,
yeah,
but that trauma
it's
could either
overcoming that trauma.
push push you into the arena of being an empath and very caring and very conscientious of feelings and how others feel, and you work towards not hurting other people. But on the flip side of that are the people that you're the kids that handle it differently and become narcissists.
Yep. Exactly. So, and
And because they can't self-soothe, they can't um create those uh
Moments of
perspective,
will where they need to just have the willpower to overcome and move on.
right,
Mhm.
or a different perspective, or again, accountability.
Yep.
They rely on others to fuel them with what their needs are, what they think their needs are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's like you were saying, it's a completely parasitic existence
Mm-hmm.
that they experience, and they subject everybody around them to, and they
Yep.
bring nothing but chaos,
Yes.
you know
The par-
and uh, initially they all, most of them come across, and I think it's important to point out there's different forms of narcissists. For example, you have your somatic narcissists, which are the over-sexualized males, that are big on their looks and the, expensive car and the, what I like to call nut flexing.
Yeah, yeah.
And
They use their thing. They use
yeah,
their material items are a part of their personality.
Yeah, a specific object of that they use to extend themselves and make it a big focal point, and
Right.
without it,
So it's
they're
idolization essentially, right? They're idolize their bodies, so they take pride over achieving pride in the fact that they look good,
that
and that they do this and they do that, or the fact that they have that Lambo, or the fact that they have that Mercedes, or the fact that they have this nice executive high chair job. They That's a part of
exactly.
their persona.
yes.
Exactly. And then the female equivalent of the somatic narcissist is the histrionic, the super over sexualized female that leads with her sexuality. You have your strippers and your, sex workers and porn stars, that is guaranteed to be either narcissistic or borderlines. But to break it down even further, you have that somatic histrionic, again, male, female counterpart, respectively, and that's how they act out. But then you also have your covert narcissists. See,
Hmm.
those two, like the male, female, overt, because that's the overt narcissist, they're easy to spot. The
Yes.
one, the covert. The covert narcissist is a real nice person. A lot of times they're cerebral, they're highly intellectual, or they're quiet. They tend to fall into the passive aggressive category, and these are the people that out in the world nobody would ever know that they're narcissists, but those specifically are the ones that behind closed doors, the nightmare only happens behind closed doors.
Hmm.
Nobody
Exactly.
out
So,
nobody can imagine what this person is really like, and
exactly.
nobody would believe you if you said it, because that's not how they're perceived, that's not how they put themselves out,
Hmm.
you know
And
so
in the complexity behind that with psychologists, even there's a history going back to the pages before, because it's sort of like, the trend that people were extroverted. So therefore, the narcissism is an extroverted behavior. So what the histrionics, the somatic one, so that everyone thought that, oh, so that's a consistency, so that's narcissism. So if we do the opposite of that and we're healthy, no, that's not clearly the case, because we have introverted people and they could be covert narcissists as well. And the way they display of anger or their tantrums is that, a guy that starts screaming in front of the cashier register and berating people, and everyone's just not fine with it or whatnot. And there's a
yeah.
dude next to him, and he says nothing, head down, but deep down he's clenching his fist, and he's really like going through scenarios as what he should do about the situation, but nothing comes out of it. He finally, in the privacy of their own home, like, or whatever, they start flipping out, and they start having the tantrum right there and then, at that
And
very moment.
even if it's not a tantrum, they
Mm.
tend to be very passive aggressive.
Yeah.
So
Passive
Hmm.
aggressive.
they're very self conscious and aware that they can't be judged by others by just confronting the issue head on. They have to do it internally.
Hmm.
co-
Yep.
covertly. They're
Covertly.
manipulating.
Yeah.
Both of them, both of those uh categories, whether covert or overt, the name of the game is manipulation and control.
Hmm.
They feel like they have to be, in control, because internally they're out of control.
Yep.
So it's all a projection onto whoever is around them, and it's usually the primary source of supply for the narcissist is, again, the intimate partner.
Hmm.
Whether a spouse, a girlfriend, or a boyfriend, or a husband, like that. Those are their main source of supply. The secondary sources are, could be family members, and tertiary sources could be strangers, somebody that they just get an ego hit, like a boost to their ego from, the cashier, or just some random person, but nothing carries the potency for them as
Yes.
the energy, the draining really that they could do to their intimate partner, because that's the one that's really ensnared. And ensnaring is what they do, because at the beginning it's a golden period. It's the love bombing. You think you found the person of your dreams. They tick every box and beyond. And we can go down this rabbit hole a little further. What the reason that they're very perceptive, and they know through conversation, observation of, let's say, a new target for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They read that person really well, and they know what your needs are. So they're going to present them to you like they're bringing this to you. And on top of that, what they're doing is that they're projecting an idealized version of you back to you. So what we really fall in love with is that idealized image, because it's an illusion. It's not real. That's really not what they're about. That's not what they're feeling. That's not, it's all purposes of hooking you and nailing you down. Once they have you, once they know they have your heart, they have your body, your mind, whatever it is they want from you, that's when the devaluation starts. And then
Mm-hmm.
you're good enough. It could start with small things and then keep going and going until they either dispose of you, or even worse, they keep you around for years on end, just abusing you. But
So
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. That's why the corporate world is so full of cutthroat people. It's just a
Yeah.
big. Go ahead.
So yeah, there's two things I would like to point out when you said about the corporate world. And it has to do with pop culture references. There's the film, for your viewers are familiar with, Christian Bale, American Psycho. So yet he was at like the late 80s yuppie, stock traders and so on and forth, but there was a structure of society around that people were so vain, superficial. They really don't care people's names. It was always about reactions and hits. And
Taking
there's
advantage of investors.
Yes, exactly. And there's like, Montgomery Burns of Simpsons that he's like, say, it's like family, friends, and religion. These are the three demons you must slay in order to succeed in business. You know,
Mm.
so those things like what you talk about, like they are like sort of institutionalized, it's culturalized within a certain industry, like in the corporate world, and that's very important. Like you articulated, there's aspects of your life where you have to deal a form or a gradients of narcissism,
And the
and
families, the
yeah,
families.
and the families are sucked in it too, as well. Families or friends are also sucked in it too. So it's almost that you are having a triangle relationship with upon others and fractal, and the only thing that why the whole idea of what we're talking about is like control yourself, because you can't keep track of everything else to a whole degree, but there's basic tenets you can do, like as we were touching on little tip points, like say what do I do in this scenario for me, because this is about yourself, so
Right.
if it,
Right.
yeah, so
So like
mhm,
specifically um just raising kids in general, when you're trying to raise a child with a narcissistic parent, not necessarily suffering from a disorder, but a lack of the knowledge of the trauma that is affecting them, and trying to keep that balanced in a child's life. How do you how do you react to that? What's the best way to react to children that are exposed to that?
that's a tough one, because to co-parent with a narcissist is no small feat.
mhm,
They will, they usually, smear the children. Uh, you're the bad guy or you're the bad woman, and the kids are the sad part is about this is that the pattern repeats. In other words, those kids, if there's more than one, the kids are always, they love to, first of all, they love to triangulate, which is what you're
Mhm.
talking about, the triangle. They like to pit people against each other
Mhm.
because that's an assertion of
Great.
control for them in
Yep.
their mind.
Right.
So that split of empath and narcissist, or golden child and black sheep, say, or scapegoat, they usually set that up with their own kids. And what distinguishes the golden child is compliant. The golden child gives the narcissist what it needs. The golden child doesn't fight the narrative. The golden child doesn't question. The golden child is pretty much putty in the
Mhm.
narcissist. The black sheep or scapegoat is pushed into that position because usually the black sheep or scapegoat is the truth teller of the family.
Mhm.
That's the one that points out, that's me in my case, the one that points out the inconsistencies, that questions, that points out the lies, that points out everything. And the first time it happens, I'm going to tell you about my experience. When I was 5 years old, I was the golden child. I'm the elder of the two. My brother's younger than me. I was the golden child till I was 5. And when I was 5 years old, my mother was having a conversation with someone where she was just talking trash about some woman. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember that she didn't say the same thing the next day in front of somebody else. So she started talking about the same woman again, as if she really liked her and this woman was fantastic and da da da. And I said, that's not what you said. You said this and this and this and this. That was it. That was the end of the golden child era for me. And I was immediately
Mhm. So.
that in my 40s, my mother to bring that up. They don't forget that and they don't forgive. They have very selective memory because there's a lot of shit that they'll, oh, excuse me, there's a lot of stuff that they'll claim not to remember. And a lot of
Yep.
that has to do with them being so in the moment. They're in such a defensive state of mind and survival mode that they don't think of consequences. So a lot of the stuff that they say and do, they really don't remember. A lot of things they do,
Yeah,
but
they
God
believe they
help,
can do and do whatever they want, and no one can tell them otherwise.
Yep. It's very
right?
solid.
But
It's very
but
solid
it's
system. Yeah.
do as I say, not as I do, because if you call them out on anything, they will never forget that. And that's
Mhm.
another thing they do. They arm themselves with information. They'll ask you, especially at the beginning of relationships, they want to know. They dig for info. They want to know your secrets. They want to know your hangups. They want to know all the things that you've endured. And when you least expect it, they'll hurl it in your face.
Mm.
They use it as a weapon.
It's like an
Again,
obsession. It's an obsession. It's almost like stalking, the mind of a stalker.
yeah, they
Mhm.
infiltrate the mind. They infiltrate the mind to the point that your thoughts, everything a person does, starts revolving around how is this person going to react. You know,
Mhm.
I always describe living with a narcissist as walking on eggshells through a minefield.
Mhm.
You just never know when they're going to go off. You never know when something's going to be used against you, even if it's not anything bad or anything that you've done that's particularly shameful or anything. They find a way to turn it into that and to weaponize everything,
Mhm.
everything. So the less that you share of yourself, the better. And to help people out, because the ideal or the key is to not get involved with them to begin with. So
Mhm.
it's super important to really familiarize oneself with their behaviors when they're at their best. The
Yep.
truth is the red flags are always there, but there's something called the simple no test. And the simple no test is when you first meet somebody, whether they come across narcissistic or not, because again, they're very good at hiding their true self or what's left of it.
Mhm.
Um, is to say no to them for something simple. It doesn't have to be, a big deal. Like if they need a ride or they want to go somewhere or they want to do something, you just say no. And
Mhm.
and and witness their reaction. If the person does not take no for an answer, if they overreact or get angry or nag you or keep insisting, that is a huge red flag, because that is a tell they can't stand being said no to, because again, it's all about their control and they're the ones in charge.
Right.
So overtly or passive aggressively, this is across the board with all, the disordered individuals. And again, let's forget about labels. If the person is toxic in your life,
Well, the traumas that it's hard to try to cut that process off with children that have parents like that.
Mm-hmm.
And heaven forbid both parents be that way. I mean, that is
the child has no one to turn to.
Exactly, because it's always up to the point, Red, you just like 17 years, around that point, but some children react to that. This is why, going a bit off a tangent, we have missing childs or just children just running away from the homes at 16, at 15, at 14 or earlier, they have to remove themselves from the situation to be in an environment that's far more stable, and that's even the extreme case if the entire environment is very narcissistic and toxic, that you're not an adult yet. You're not allowed, you're remotely to say, it's whether the circumstances, just like the choice. It's like, I can weather this out. I just don't have to be here,
right.
comes,
So would you
yeah.
say it would be easier for a child? Of course, it would be easier for a child. So it's this is all dependent on
Mhm.
people who grow up with the environment that they're in, and
Mhm.
it's more beneficial for the person who is dealing with a narcissistic parent to go create a space where that child can overcome with a support system that's healthy to help deal with that.
Yes, it's also undoing everything. If you undo everything in your space and time and your reality, then it follows through with the child, you know? So therefore, in one spot, they were told that down is up and up is down, but in your area, it's not, and that kind of creates a cognitive dissonance. It's almost a tug of war, but you have to remain steadfast within your area and in your space that, this is the way to go. And over time, you also want to soothe and heal as well, because in if one party is narcissistic, okay, you're both from healing, the child and you as the parent that's also healing from this and wisening up. That's going to be more found in relations, and even though it's a little bit complex with a child at any given age, they have to putting pieces together. In adolescence, it also coming to age, it conflicts because why? Because that point the teenager or the young adult is trying to come to terms with their own identity, their own space, and some and from my experience as well, I've come to a convinced that I really don't care about my parents' circumstance, tug of war. And it's the perception from their end, and one's and that you want to remove yourself the situation from there. So ultimately, that you know they have to down the road where people experience is that they have choices in life and they take responsibility and accountability for it. You are on the first phase. You are breaking away from narcissism altogether, and you're not really narcissistic to begin with. But it's on the other end right there. If there's no choices, there's no accountability, there's definitely nothing at all. You're either narcissist yourself or you're just someone who's just sucked into it and that can't really get out of it. Which is very interesting that you two were pointing out certain things about about attractions. And Ani says like they planned and devised in the no test. For people who are in dating spheres right now, they could have a signal that oh, if someone if I say no but they're still coming at me, I guess they are interested in. Well, to behold, you're roped in, and if it escalates, it comes down to, and then there's you can see if a child that we create or talk at the topic at the end, it's like saying, oh, we can't really get out. Could have cut them off like friends and family members like that. Now it's just like a co-parenting situation.
So you kind of just have to attack it when it arrives. You have to not focus on it. You have to not dwell on it. You have to just kind of sit back, relax, and roll with the punches, and take your time reacting or not reacting, because sometimes I think not reacting is better than giving a reaction, because that's what they want, right? They want that reaction out of you. They want to feel like, ooh, they sparked, they triggered you. They want to feel that.
That's what they want. That's how they hook you. That's why they call it the gray rock method, where your reaction, how does a gray rock react? It doesn't.
Yeah,
It's a
and
gray rock.
especially with kids mixed up in the environment. I think it's important for us to remember that we have to not reacting to things like that and not letting those things be an issue is going to be what's healthiest for a child, because a child shouldn't have to process those types of behaviors. A child should not even have to witness those types of behaviors. A child should be worried about being a child and growing up and learning things along the way on the steps, and for them to focus on their self and where they fit in the world. Not focused on where they fit in with their family.
But the thing is, with narcissists, that's not an option. That's why, if you have kids with a narcissist or a toxic person, you really only have two options. You either break free, are then able to give that child or those kids 50% of the time of normalcy, where it's almost like a sanctuary for them. Or you ride that ride, stay for the sake of the kids, right? But then it's a question of how healthy is it for those kids to live in a state of chaos 100% of the time. So that's an individual choice. And if you decide to stay, then you really, I think everybody needs to become really familiarized and aware of what narcissism is and how to deal with these people. But if you're going to stay, then you really, really have to do an enormous amount of
Work on yourself.
Research, but self-healing, because the need to stay, or the desire to stay, one has to ask oneself, where does codependency fall into this? Because they hook you back in. It's called hoovering. It's like a vacuum, like they suck you back in. If you manage to escape, right, with or without kids. Let's say you break away and you break up and you're no longer in this relationship. They're gonna find a way to get you back. They're gonna come back with trying to recapture that initial golden period. And because that was so wonderful at the beginning, and we convince ourselves, wow, this person does love me, and they really did love me.
Yeah, it's almost like they're trying to hit a reset button and then do the whole thing all
likes
over.
to feel used. But each time they get you back, it's gonna get worse. The abuse is gonna amp up, because they know they have you, and that you will keep coming back no matter what they do to you.
Yep.
So then it's a question of, what kind of example do you want to set on for your children? Do you want, and again, it's a matter of personal choice. But for someone that stays, the armor really has to get,
eventually those kids ooh, that's interesting, because that can almost work in, if co-parenting is done right, then the children will eventually get smart enough to realize what's going on, because you have the reaction happening in the negative environment and the healing happening in a positive environment, and by being in that positive environment, they realize what's going on, and they realize where they're growing and feeling good and feeling successful is, and that's where they want to stay. So they almost naturally develop that instinct on their own.
Yeah, they're going to gravitate to who makes them feel good. But aside from that, fortunately, we're in a time now where there's so much information available, and there's a lot of info out there their videos on YouTube and stuff on how to talk to kids about their narcissistic parent. Obviously, according to their age, it has to be age appropriate. But I wish this information wasn't around when I was a kid, because really the big study on narcissism didn't come about till the mid-90s. And
Exactly.
I wish somebody would have sat me down and explained some things to me of what's wrong with mommy. You know, that would have made a world of difference, because narcissistic parents really get into their kids' head. It's like a chain. It just keeps perpetuating. And at some point the book has to stop with someone. So the one that becomes aware, the burden of responsibility falls on that individual to do things differently or handle the situation differently. And the children can be made aware of circumstances. Again, age appropriate. You can't explain stuff like this to a 2-year-old, but and I'm not an expert in this, obviously, but there are many out there who are on how to handle that. And I really suggest that people with kids, because that's the toughest. That's the toughest, because that's the hook. That's a big hook. And they use the kids all the time to manipulate the partner. That's the
Exactly.
kid caught in the middle. It's a nightmare, you know. But the main thing ultimately for combating the temptation of getting back or being stuck in that loop is addressing one's own codependent issues as to people that keep going back and going back. Ultimately, it boils down to self-worth. If one doesn't have a sense of self-worth, or it's weak, it's a shoo-in.
It's
It's a
constantly
shoo-in.
shifting to find the balance, and it can't be consistent.
It can't. Exactly. So once one develops a sense of self-worth and self-value, the codependency will dissolve. And these things take time and consistent effort and conscious focus on overcoming things, and getting and having an understanding of oneself. Because that's the thing, that narcissists, you spend enough time with the narcissist and their thoughts start being supplanted in your own mind, and you start thinking and seeing yourself through their eyes. So it's almost like being hijacked mentally, psychologically, by somebody who's broken.
Yep.
So
And there's
it's very
a terminology.
easy for it to become this vicious cycle that people just don't know how to get out of. And once you really get an understanding of what they're about, what their game is, and it is a game to them, it's incredible. It gives you a sense of detachment, where you react differently, or don't react, as the case deems, right? But it's essential to really figure out and get a grip on how to handle these people, and how to deal with the circumstances that one finds oneself in, and getting out of that. I mean, there's a lot of trauma involved to the victim. Say, nobody likes to be a victim, but
Yeah, I think patronizing them. No patronizing, no feeling sympathetic whenever you have to be in contact with a narcissist, or somebody that doesn't realize that they're putting off narcissistic behavior. They have to you have to become emotionless to that, because it's not your problem, it's their problem. Let them break. Only they can fix themselves.
and they never will. So
Yeah, you just
and
stand beside and laugh at them, and just laugh at the oblivious and obvious failure.
Yep. And it's just take it for what it is. It's just absurd.
and
Pointed
and
out. Yep.
sorry, and when there are children involved, as I was saying, they use the children, right? So let's say you split up from your ex and you have dual custody, and something's going on with the kids, with school or medical or whatever, or you need to pick them up at a certain time, and the narcissist will text you, say, and will ask you a question, about the kids, but then it doesn't end there. They go into a dissertation, or a guilt trip, or just trying to pick a fight or hook you back into that conversation again, back with them. The solution there is to only respond to the issue at hand, the children. I'll be there. You know, they could send you a 3-page text that looks like 3 chapters. And in there is, what time are you going to pick up the kids? And then your response is, I'm picking up the kids at 10 or whatever, regardless of everything else they said. If it's not about the kids, there's nothing to talk about.
Hmm.
So the
Mhm.
shorter the answer, the more detached the answer, and not giving them emotion, even if those emotions are brought out, because it's hard. It's hard. Until it takes time. One does get to the point where one can be unaffected by it because you see them for what they are and you know the game, but it takes a while to get there. So you can still have those knee-jerk reactions because they know every button to push. They know your weaknesses. They know what sets you off. They know what hooks you. They know what melts your heart. They know
Oh,
you
yeah,
inside out.
especially in marriages that are failing in today's society.
Speaking of which of that, marriages and relationships, when Ani described about sending you a text about the kids in short, there's no short answers. If there's no compliance to that, for example, that you pick up the kids at 10, okay, and she's not there with the kids at 10, all right. Again, she's going to deflect, where are you? Where are the kids? All this stuff, and there's a whole big drama about it, and bear that, that she is going to create a story about why the kids weren't you were there at such 10 at 10 o'clock. Okay.
Excuses.
Yes.
And none of that needs to, none of that. In other words, anything that they try to hook you in with,
Yeah.
to engage you with a conversation, an argument, a discussion, you do not respond. Even if you have to scream by yourself at your place or scream into a pillow and vent, you don't show them any emotion because that's what they're looking for. And they
Exactly.
frustrate them. And they'll, they're notorious for like call after call. They'll call you, or they'll send you 100 text messages. You don't respond. Eventually, they get the message. Eventually, they see it doesn't work. So they stop doing it. But if every time they send you a text and they're accusing you of something, say, and you respond with, no, because, that's not where I was coming from. Why do you always do? That's it. They got you again. They hooked you back into another argument. And it drains you. After an interaction with a narcissist, anybody who's had this, you feel drained,
Oh
exhausted.
yeah,
It's
they're very complex, very complex. They will mentally just tire you out to where you don't want to do anything.
because they're
Yep.
energetic vampires. They
Hmm.
really are energetic vampires. Again,
Yep.
they can't self-soothe. They can't generate their own joy. They can't generate their own happiness. They can't generate their own common sense or, use of logic and reason. Or so it's all about taking from whoever is willing to give. So the
Yeah.
minute you cut off that supply and they see that you mean business and that it's their tricks are not gonna work anymore, it's not gonna fly.
Is it their
They'll
adrenochrome?
they they will they will find another victim. That's when they can't get when they can't get from you what they think they need, they'll move on to somebody else. But if they can entrap you, if they can, whether it's in a conversation or back into the relationship, you're going to start at ground zero and a few steps back, because again, every time they lasso you back, it becomes harder and harder because they amp it up. They amp up the game.
They
Hmm.
adapt. They adapt.
Sorry, and gonna change and blah blah blah. It doesn't happen. That's only to get you back. It's a manipulation. They are
Hmm.
compulsive, perpetual liars.
Upset, and they
They
obsess over doing that. They obsess over it.
they
Hmm.
lie about everything.
Yep.
As
It's
long as
And that
it's
always it's
like
always what's they obsess about how they can turn this situation around and make it benefit me. Doesn't matter
yep.
what the cost. Doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process. If I can get it done,
nope.
I'm gonna get it done.
The
Yes.
kids don't, the partner, no, nothing matters. Only them, who is the raging toddler that needs to get what they need to get.
Right,
Exactly.
But
exactly, because emotionally they're stuck at that age where that trauma developed from, whether it be 4 years old or 10 years old or 16 years old.
Hmm. And not
exactly.
and not to go a little bit off of this, but I think for most people that this is an introduction after all. and we're all dealing with like co-parenting, whatnot. Narcissists will complicate everything, but there are means you can do. Like for example, when you're trying to pick up your children, from what I've read, not read, listened from a video, n- no show, right? So try to call, just call a police officer, so they just record it on the reports that there is some interference, and that's on record, because all you did was like send a message like, pick up the kids at 10, and that's it. And you comply with what's supposed to be done. If it's not going there, then there's means to do that. Okay, that's if granted from what Ani's saying, that wherever her triangulation of her relation of people they sucking into, okay, if they need the supply. If they can't get anyone else, so in that complicated relation, that in their end that she or he is absolutely by themselves, then their ultimate goal is to use the children as leverage for you to against you, and provoke you to make a mistake.
Because that's the only weakness you have is of course your children, because your children come first,
Exactly.
Yeah.
and they know
Mm-hmm.
that, and they prey on that
Yeah.
vulnerability that's there.
That's
Yes,
also
exactly.
why it's important to start educating the kids again based on their age. And for that, like I said, there's plenty of info out there that parents that are dealing with this can look into to start, because the kids also, children of narcissists are in a very stressful situation themselves. They sense, like you say, they sense there's something wrong, but they don't have the vocabulary or the capability, or they're too young to make sense of any of it. And I'm pretty clear and aware about stuff, and it still took me years to figure out what I was dealing with, because I was like, she's not crazy because she functions in the world, but something is off, you know
Mhm.
and again, knowledge is power, right? And you want to empower your kids, because there's no way around it. That's unless the mother's a murderer, the father's a murderer, there's no way, or super abusive, there's towards them, there's no way of getting them away unless you get full custody, right?
Mhm.
So on some
Exactly.
level, going to have to deal with that partner or that ex-partner until the kids are adults, because
Mhm.
they're under parental, uh they're your responsibility basically for both of you. But there are techniques and ways that are suggested by these experts like Richard Grannon and Sam Vaknin, which I really recommend to your viewers to who are dealing with narcissists, or have been the victims of narcissistic abuse, to tune in and really dive in, guys. Dive in, because it's not only happening on the micro level and on the family societal level, but it's happening in our governmental level. It's a prerequisite since I think
Yep.
the 1960s for high positions of power for these people to have a level of psychopathy or sociopathy or narcissism, because they don't have a conscience. So
E-
they can go to war, they could kill people, anything can it there's they sleep like babies at night.
Mhm. And
Really,
the
it's on us to educate ourselves, protect ourselves, and for people that have children, protect your children as much as possible. And the way to really take a step in that direction is by becoming as informed as you can about this. Not only the disorder, but equally as important, if not more important, is how to deal with them and how to protect yourself and your children.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the very and would like to elaborate what you said about information. Our current paradigm and the way it is right now is complete but different than we before. So there wasn't. Right now, we are using engaging in social media, and things are still just changing over our forms of communication. Back in the 90s, there was internet, but the it was still predominant social interactions. So the level of predominant extrovertedness was centered around, and the research was through saying, advising people to deal with narcissism through those means. But over time, things have complicated through social media. Right
Yeah.
now, the biggest trend is covert narcissism. That's how I got myself into it, because the covert narcissist thrives in social media because there's subtle cues, passive aggressiveness, and virtual signaling. All that I've learned through means that because that's the environment I'm in. The now that both are in play and the scales towards the one end, you know, it's it doesn't take away the overall thesis to learn about narcissism, that which is the behavior and disorder, and there are means to protect yourself, and also doing your own due diligence is to effectively, navigate your life and your world and how you are going to be ultimately, you know, and that spreads around and ripples around because when you approve yourself, everything falls in place, the children fall in place, even your social circles, the people, family and friends,
Right.
that actually come around, the people that actually matter,
Yeah,
you
the
know.
camaraderie the morale that comes with the camaraderie and the uplifting and the support system that you have. That's what. Yeah,
Yes.
that's where I was getting at with the children, and it's going to be the support systems. Are the support systems surrounding that
Yep.
that child's foundational?
Yep. And
Grandparents, cousins,
yep.
sisters, brothers,
And it's
Exactly.
so
aunts, uncles.
it's so important to have a support system, because one thing that these people do is they like to isolate and separate their partner from their family, their friends. They'll smear your friends. They never like your friends. They don't like your family. They don't, so they isolate you to the point where people usually feel very alone because they've lost their support system. And unless you've
Yep.
dealt with a narcissist, unless you've been in it, people can't imagine. Like, so you can, let's say you're having all these problems and you go to a friend and you're telling the friend or the family member, look, this person is, oh, they're just difficult. You can work it out, go to counseling. They don't understand that there is no working it out. They don't
Hmm.
understand the order. It's not a regular uh functioning, a human being. If unless you have experienced what it's like to be with a narcissist or to have a parent that's a narcissist, they have no idea. They have
Yep.
no idea.
And also that for parents that have children, their own children that are in adolescence, that they could get hooked themselves into groups that are cultish because there are narcissists in cultist groups. Again, it's derived around what I want to allude earlier to the earlier terminology, flying monkeys, that things can get complex out of the family, that it's just you could get absorbed into a different environment, and it's like it doesn't have to be family, it doesn't have to be anything, but right now that you walked yourself into because unconsciously everyone wants to be in a familiar place, and also that what you explained, Ani, that things are have to be addressed or it just repeats the pattern, but now you put yourself in a different environment where you think everything is different, you think everything is all done and said and done. No, it's just another phase, and you just coming back into, you know, the same old story, the same old plot. You just flip the actors, the characters, the settings, the topic at hand, but the plot is
And
still
that's
the
it. Would have been your support system could have
same.
been infiltrated by the narcissist, because they start working on that early
Hmm.
on. They start smearing you. Those are the flying monkeys. They end up doing the bidding for the narcissist, because the narcissist has convinced them that you're the problem.
Hmm.
So when you go to them for the problem, then they already have the perspective or the belief that you're the one with the problem, even if
Hmm.
it's your family, because they always play the victim. They always play like it's not them, it's not me, it's you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yep.
And to your point, that I want to touch on that. Uh,
Right. I
Dating, all of these things are havens for narcissists, because what do they do? They present a false persona. You can be anyone
That
or
sounds
present.
like a great topic for the next one, dating, because a lot of I'm seeing this now going on in the dating world, just with the dates that I have been on personally. So let
Yep.
me take a note of that. And
That's I got plenty of experience in that arena.
good,
Boy,
good, good, good.
the
Yes.
The
It's
dating app.
affecting us. It's affecting of us all different ages because the way we court ourselves now is fundamentally different before and even past generations because other it's just simply that the means of communication is just through mail and phone and just meeting up at a social place. Now the technologies that have changed shift around as almost completely rendered like obsolete so that everyone's just engaging on social media. Everyone's hanging out in game lobbies and whatnot. They don't really have to go interact physically and stimulate our senses through that means. So anyone could adopt the persona. The narcissist, so it's so extremely a haven for them to be in the
Yeah,
virtual space. Yeah.
it's the perfect environment for them to just get an unlimited amount of supply and ensnare an unlimited amount of people. And the dating apps, my goodness, I mean, people present themselves as whatever
Glorious. Some of them are very good. Some of them are very real too. Some of them are very real, and then
Exactly.
some of you have to
But
sift through a lot to find some that are real enough. But
yeah,
you can see it number one in the photos.
yeah, the numbers show the studies that have been done, the vast majority of the dating app options, the people on there.
Yep. And the dead giveaway for anyone who's in these dating apps, if you're communicating with someone that you think you're the only one, regardless, no. There are five people talking to that person on that dating app, okay? And the reason why I also notice is they try to pull you into their social media handle to disguise the fact that, when you look into their, the direct messagings or their interact, anyone could be a friend or anyone could be a cousin or a family member, but you don't know. You really don't know. But it's
No,
blatantly obvious in the dating app. It's like, why are you
yeah,
talking to five other people? You know?
people need to be vetted really
Yeah.
before
Mhm.
Yeah.
anything. The world is not what it used to be in the 90s. Every
Exactly. Uh-huh.
80
But you
everything has changed. You
but
know,
we could still
That's
empower
another
ourselves.
topic to get on
Yeah.
to is the equalization of man and woman in society and what kind of impact that's had on society. Has it been negative or positive?
I think like everything, it has had its positive uh,
We
outcomes,
don't
but
have to go into detail on that
yeah,
now. That would be
Yes.
something in the future.
that's for
Ultimately, yeah,
one.
I was going to comment about that where we are right now, the information's here, okay, like through YouTube, through Facebook, all this is there for us uh to actually get onto it, the great trajectory for your followers and face group, there are Facebook groups. I don't have references to them, but everyone does their due diligence, you know, and doesn't and can turn this around rather just be
Yeah, you
overtly
have to do
cynical
your
and
research.
pessimistic,
I'm
reset.
already anticipating the situation where one of my viewers here today on Facebook, I'm gonna see or talk to them, or they're gonna talk to me, and they're going to say, just something stupid and something that's just completely uncalled for, and I'm gonna have to just, okay, well, what'd you think about it?
Hmm.
And I'll be able to tell whether or not they listened to the whole thing and took it out of context or not. And at that point, I'll just roll, and just not really give it a reaction. Just be like, okay, well, talk to me when you watch the thing from start to finish.
Yes, because ultimately, this is your life, people. You can reset. The narcissist wants to make you think that they are the sun, they are the moon, they're everything. No, you're just one out of a billion people. Okay, you're not that special snowflake. You can live without them, and their whole world, the flying monkeys, everything. You can have people that matters to you the most, and you can have a life that is truly yours, and being being happy, being
Right.
fulfilled.
And
And go ahead.
one thing that I want to touch on is another red flag with these people when you first meet someone. If you see that they're rushing you to either get in a relationship, get married, move in, have kids, whatever, if you're feeling rushed,
Hmm.
that huge red flag. First, you do the no test. Okay, that's the big one, and then run in the other direction if you have any of those reactions that I mentioned earlier. But
I
if
think
they're
my first vet is appearance on there, because you can tell. You know, I've gotten into this about digital. It's because of Elon, but the digital personification of yourself is an extension of yourself, and you know you got to pass the online test. Can I look at your profiles, your social media, and learn something from you? And what am I learning from you? Is it something of substance, or is it that you're just a broken down person going through some stuff? You know, so your social media to me is the biggest thing.
Yep. And if lack of a better word, guys,
That's vet number one.
yeah, and lack of a better word, when you talked about that for your viewers, it's almost like you're dealing with a bot or a scammer, like saying, it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah,
put your money in my
The
account.
Snapchat filters are a big thing. That shows me
Yes.
insecurity in what you think in yourself, and you have to use a filter to feel beautiful as your digital extension of yourself. And so if you have a Snapchat filter on your photo, like I swipe left, keep going on to the
but
next one.
remember,
Like
but remember that's easy to pick out with the overt ones, but the covert ones, those are the tricky ones. You know,
Mhm.
those are the ones that play down and they play, humble and meek and down to earth. That's their mask. So those are a little trickier. And at the end of the day, people can present whatever illusion they want to put forth,
Mhm.
on
right.
social. So
Okay. Well, on today's topics, shit, we learned a lot. I took away from the most of it, and I'm sure everybody else took away either the same reaction or the exact opposite reaction. um, but cultural, it doesn't matter what type of setting you're in, cultural, family environment, public environment, private environment. It doesn't matter what environment you're in. You're going to have narcissistic behaviors to deal with, whether it be disorders or just a lacking out because of an emotional trauma. If it, and the signs of it getting out of hand beyond repair is the best thing you can do is just not react, cut them out as soon as you recognize it. And if it's somebody that you can't cut out, it's not an option. You have to dig a little bit deeper inside yourself to understand the behaviors of a narc and to be able to manage a narc and focus on restoring your life.
Mhm.
exactly.
So I appreciate you guys coming in here. Go ahead, Ani.
No, that's good. We're good.
Okay. All right. Yeah, all the links to Richard Grannon and Peterson
Sam.
and Vigilante's channel. Those are all three good channels to check out. I watch them. Those are my channels. No, those are our channels. We will all watch them. So,
Thanks.
Yep.
Shout out.
and this
Thank you.
this channel is our channel. Everybody
And
watching.
if I can just cuz I on the one video if I can shill it a little bit on my channel Vigilante. It's called Tuning In.
Mhm.
TOONING
So good.
in.
So good.
Check that out, guys. That's gonna give us some that offers a tool to use when dealing with these individuals. That's a
Yes.
different perspective. And from my own experience, and I've been on the planet for a few decades, it works. It works like a charm.
Hmm. My final
Awesome.
comment is that this is a tool for this should be a tool in educational journey for to discover yourself uh, through the narcissistic behavior, through narcissism, because on the outside of that, it's just your life, and there's just little things you don't have to personalize, because in the end, that earlier in the conversation was one of the things that came into cross in my mind, is that it's the ability that can you just resolve it and just move forward, simple as, like, washing the dishes, no big deal, or you drop
Minim-
something, clean.
minimize the attention and focus.
Yep,
And
exactly.
the best bet with a narcissist is cut your losses, because I know, we think, oh, but I've put so many years in and we've built it's all been an illusion.
Right.
Cut your losses. Save yourself. Life is too short.
Snap back to reality.
and reclaim self, because those are parts of ourselves that have been. The longer we're with a narcissist, the more of yourself erodes away.
All right. All right. That was good. Next video, next stream is going to be on dating and strategies to choose the right date, and filtering your dates through the narcissistic tests.
That's going to be a good one.
Yes.